Stunning new developments in the aftermath of the Jussie Smollett case. The Chicago Sun-Times reporting Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx has been subpoenaed to appear in court. A retired judge is reportedly pushing for a special prosecutor to investigate her handling of the case. Mike Tobin is live from Chicago. Mike, so why is Kim Foxx being subpoenaed?
Well, Sandra, the petition asking for a special prosecutor says Fox's handling of the Jussie Smollett case was plagued with irregularity. You will remember that Kim Foxx publicly said that she was going to recuse herself from the Jussie Smollett case right around the time he transitioned from being treated as the victim of a hate crime to being charged by police as the suspect in a hoax. The reason she was stepping aside was that she had extensive contact with family and supporters of Smollett when he was still thought to be a victim. Foxx did not recuse the Cook County prosecutor's office. Text later revealed that she kept on top of the case and even made recommendations about dropping the charges. As reported by the Chicago Sun-Times, the petition written by retired appellate judge Sheila O'Brien says Fox's conflict in this matter is beyond dispute. And in March, you remember, the charges against Smollett were abruptly dropped. Fox's deputy Joseph Magotz has also been subpoenaed to appear before the special prosecutor.
Just revealing a different story as Chicago's top prosecutor recused herself from the Jussie Smollett case after dropping charges against him.
I recused myself from the Smollett case out of an abundance of caution. What I've said continuously when I recused myself from this case was that I was not involved.
Here to break down what these text messages say about the state of our criminal justice system is attorney Deborah Blum. Thanks you so much for being here this morning. We appreciate it. Before we break down some of these text messages, overall, what do you think has happened here in Chicago?
Well, I think this shows everyone that's watching that criminal justice system is not always fair. I've had many clients who I believe are deserving of outright dismissals, and I've worked very hard. Typically in those cases, they're not indicted. Here they indicted Jussie Smollett, and then they dismissed his charges. Many, many hours of police work went into this. And at the end of the day, he should have had to pay back more money, and his charges were just dismissed. That's not fair. Usually my clients, we work so hard to get the dismissal, and when we do, we're thrilled.
Let's go to some of these text messages from Kim Foxx. Here's the first one back in March 8th. So, I'm recused, but when people accuse us of overcharging cases, 16 counts on a Class 4 felony becomes Exhibit A. Now, that is a lot of charges in this case, but they swung it all the way back the other way and let the kid completely off the hook. I mean, so now that you've angered everybody.
Right. Absolutely. It is a lot of charges, and usually people don't even get accused of filing a fake police report. Many people do it, but then they don't get indicted. They don't have 16 counts. You know, she compared this to R. Kelly, who had 4 victims and only 10-count indictment. This was a 16-count indictment.
And here's that text right there. Let's show that text while you're talking about it. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, it reads, pedophile with 4 victims, 10 counts, washed up celeb who lied to cops, 16 on a case eligible for deferred prosecution. I think it's indicative of something we should be looking at generally. Just because we can charge something doesn't mean we should.
I think other prosecutors' offices need to take this message to heart. Many times people are charged with crimes that should not be. So this highlights that the prosecutor's office has a lot of control in what they choose to charge someone with. And here they should have perhaps not indicted the case, because if they knew they were ultimately going to dismiss it, they shouldn't have impaneled a grand jury.
But, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, generally speaking, overall, I feel like the country was so in tune with this and watched this so closely, this whole thing unfold, because so many people say, if I don't have connections, if I don't have money, I don't have the wealth to be able to get myself out of a situation, how is this fair to the rest of the country?
Well, I actually, usually from my experience, if somebody's famous, I think that the prosecution goes above and beyond to prosecute their case and make an example of them. Here it went the opposite way.
Really?
So oftentimes if somebody, I do think that the prosecution often goes after people that come from socioeconomically poor neighborhoods and they have a difficult time getting themselves out of it. But here the prosecutor's office chose not to make an example of this. They could have made an example and said you can't go in and file a police report, but they ultimately dismissed it, which doesn't send a positive message to others.
Anyone. Yeah.
For a DA, we did hear some rumblings from upset police officers in Chicago saying that this district attorney, Kim Foxx, is almost like a criminal advocate, that she's not nearly tough enough on criminals to have the job that she has. What do you think of that?
Well, she's definitely a progressive prosecutor,
Yeah.
and I do think it's important for the prosecution to share discovery. We just recently have a new bill in New York State where the prosecution is going to have to turn over more discovery materials. But I just think overall the police and the prosecution have to work so closely together. And the police here did a really good job, and this dismissal doesn't give them confidence. They're not being rewarded for their hard work.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate your time this morning.
These new text messages reveal a few things. First, that Kim Foxx did continue to discuss portions of the Smollett case with some of her staffers after she publicly claimed she recused herself. Her office later revealed that Kim Foxx's recusal was, quote, colloquial and not what was accepted as a standard legal recusal. In a text message with one of her staffers on March 8th, which is the day the 16 Smollett indictments became public, Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx texted that she's recused from the case and then apparently compared singer R. Kelly's recent felony charges with Smollett's, texting, quote, pedophile with 4 victims, 10 counts, washed up celeb who lied to cops, 16. Just because we can charge something doesn't mean we have to. R. Kelly was recently charged with 10 counts of aggravated sexual assault here in Cook County. It's widely believed that Foxx was calling R. Kelly the pedophile and comparing the singer cases to Smollett's, which was dropped. Another text that appears to be sent from an assistant state's attorney on the case reads, quote, just wish I could have anticipated the magnitude of this response and planned a bit better. Kim Foxx has responded to some of these texts that she sent to her first assistant state's attorney, Joseph Maggots, writing in a statement, quote, after the indictment became public, I reached out to Joe to discuss reviewing office policies to assure consistencies in our charging and our use of appropriate charging authority. I was elected to bring criminal justice reform, and that includes intentionality, consistency, and discretion. I will continue to uphold these guiding principles. And Foxx was rebuked by the National Attorneys Association for not recusing her entire office.
So why do you think the state's attorney's office is going after you, but allowed Smollett to walk?
Well, simply because I don't have publicity.
21-year-old Candice Clark of Hoffman Estate says she's the victim of a Kim Foxx double standard, and a Cook County judge agrees. Looked like the judge was angry.
Yes, he was very mad. He was very upset, and he did not agree with it at all.
On April 11th, Clark appeared in the Rolling Meadows courtroom of Cook County Judge Mark Martin, facing a single felony count of making a false police report. Clark is accused of giving an acquaintance access to her bank account, then telling police money had been stolen, something she denies. According to a transcript obtained by Fox 32, Judge Martin hammered prosecutors, asking, I'd like to know why Ms. Clark is being treated differently than Jussie Smollett. It's a disorderly conduct case, a lot less egregious than Mr. Smollett's case. I have a problem with it. What did you think when the judge came to your defense?
I was ecstatic, overwhelmed, and I got a little emotional because I felt like he seen my innocence in the courtroom.
Prosecutors were demanding that Clark make full restitution of $2,800 and serve deferred prosecution, something not required of Smollett. Ms. Clark is not a movie star. She doesn't have a high-priced lawyer, and this smells big time, the judge told prosecutors. Your office created this mess. There's no publicity on this case. Press gets a hold of this, it'll be in the newspaper. If they're going to cut a deal on Smollett, why not cut a deal for you?
And I'm just a regular girl just trying to make it out here, doing a job, working 10-hour shifts, overnight. I'm just trying my best.
You're not Jussie Smollett, though.
I'm not Jussie Smollett. I wish I was, but it's okay. I'll get my justice.
A spokesperson for Kim Foxx says because the case is ongoing, they have no comment. Clark, who has no previous criminal history, is due back in front of Judge Martin tomorrow.
What happened in court today?
What happened in court today was that the charges against Mr. Smollett were dismissed in return for him forfeiting his bond to the city of Chicago and completing community service.
What was that? That's an alternative prosecution, right? What does that mean exactly? What does Mr. Smollett have to do to get away from having to allocute to these charges?
So what he did was forfeited his bond and did the community service. Based on doing those things, we dismissed the case.
What kind of community service did you have to do?
He did community service at Operation Push.
Do you know how many hours or how many days or anything like that?
It was 2 days, 16 hours. working down there.
Was that what your office had agreed to? Was there days or weeks of communication leading up to
Yeah,
this?
there were ongoing negotiations from when the case was charged with this group of attorneys. We had talked to other attorneys who represented him at different stages of the case. In short, it was an ongoing process like we do in all cases.
Okay. Why was there no elocution? Why did he not have to get up and say that he did do this?
In a lot of alternative prosecutions, and this is not, when we talk about deferred prosecutions or alternative prosecutions, it's not something people traditionally think of when we talk about a prosecutor's office. So from the outside looking in, it may seem completely backwards, like what is going on. So we modeled this disposition after the statute called the Offender Initiative Probation that provides for deferred prosecution in certain low-level felonies for people who have minimal to no background, no violent felony arrests or felony charges. In those cases, they complete certain requirements, and at the end, the case is dismissed. So along the same lines as in most alternatives and deferred prosecutions, the case is dismissed at the end. In the past 2 years, we've had over 5,700 cases go to a disposition in this fashion. So while to the outside world, this is the first time probably a lot of folks have ever heard about something like this, it is something that's occurred over 5,700 times.
So do you believe that Mr. Smollett was guilty of the things that he was charged of?
Yes.
So you said in the statement that I received earlier that you stood behind the Chicago Police Department's investigation. I guess, was there any communication with them leading up to this? They seemed somewhat blindsided by this today.
We told them this morning what was going to occur in court. We also had discussions with them going back to before the case was charged as to possible dispositions and possible outcomes in the case.
Okay. So I guess how do you respond to some of the statements that the superintendent and the mayor made today? They called this a whitewash of justice and some other comments as well.
It's not a whitewash. Again, maybe to the outside looking in, some may view it as that. He was asked to do, the agreement was for him to do certain things. He did those certain things. The case was dismissed. Similarly to like roughly over 5,700 other cases over the last 2 years. We looked at this case in the same way that we looked at a lot of cases at this level. Granted, there was way more media hype and media scrutiny. There are a lot of feelings about it. To handle it differently because of that, by definition, would mean that we're handling it differently, which is something we cannot do. We have to handle each of the cases as they come. And I get it. I understand why people feel the way they do. There was a lot of time, manpower, investigative resources put into this case, and the CPD did a fantastic job. At the end of the day, in the final analysis, it's a Class 4 felony, it's a disorderly conduct, it is something pursuant to the statute that could go through a diversion program, and that's the way we looked at it in the final analysis.
Based off the response from the superintendent and the mayor, do you think that this decision and just the way everything was handled could have any impact on your office's relationship with the police department going forward or the city?
I would hope not. I've worked at this job for 29 years. I have tried 2 cases where police officers were murdered on duty. I have worked with Chicago detectives in hundreds of other cases and murder cases. I get why they feel that the way they do. Given all the circumstances of this case, given our office's priority to look at and combat violent crimes and the drivers of violence, this was the decision that was made. And I get why people would not like it and are not happy with it, but based on everything in this case, this was the right outcome.
Were you involved with this case from the time it was charged? I know Kim Fox obviously recused herself at some point, but were you involved before then, throughout?
Yes,
or?
yes, throughout.
Did you have any conversations with her after she recused herself about this case or about your decision to wrap this case up? Okay. Can you tell me why in court this morning the case file was put under seal, why that decision was made?
So under the statute, there is a sealing statute that when cases of certain levels, this case that falls into it, are sealed. That's just the law, and that's just the statute.
That's just how things are done.
That's what the law requires.
Okay. As for the brothers, the Osundario brothers. Are you aware of any other investigation, or do you know if your office is going to be pursuing any sort of charges against them? I
can't comment as to whether there are ongoing investigations or whether or not, excuse me, there are ongoing investigations as to anyone.
Okay. Let's see. I guess, can you speak a little bit more about these alternative prosecutions? You said they're for people who have been charged with low-level felonies. Is there a specific type of offender who sort of fits into the mold of somebody who might receive a disposition like that?
So if they're charged with a low-level felony, I think the statute specifically mentions disorderly conduct, burglary, theft, narcotics possession cases, retail theft, things of that nature. They have no prior felony background. They have no violent felony arrests, things of that nature.
Okay. Mr. Smollett's defense team certainly was treating this as if he had been exonerated, as if none of this had happened. You said that you're backing the police department's investigation. You still believe he was guilty of this. That's correct?
Yes.
I guess, can you speak to why they may be coming out and saying that all of a sudden they're saying Mr. Smollett is innocent, none of this actually happened, if that doesn't seem to be fitting with what your office is saying?
I can't. I mean, I'm not going to comment as to their motives. By definition, in these diversion cases or alternative prosecutions, they end with a dismissal. Okay. What's different in this case is that people are interested in it, and he was able to have a press conference afterwards. Those other 5,700 cases, I'm sure they all feel like they got a great disposition, and but they don't have the form that he has.
As for his bond, that $10,000 that's going to the city?
Yes.
So with his community service and the bond, those are the two, I guess, things that he had to complete before this could happen?
Yes.
Okay. Was there anything else going forward? Does he have to do more community service, or is this completely finished at this point?
As far as these allegations in this case, it's completely finished. And had he not done those things, the case would not have been dismissed.
How did he prove it? Was there like a letter from the group that he was working with that was given to your office saying he did do these hours, or?
Yes, we had contact or information confirming that he had been there in the time he had spent.
Okay.